She mistook the homeless man for a job applicant. Now she's forced to marry him to save her company. The homeless man she sheltered turned out to be the millionaire who destroyed her family. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The soft hum of conversation filled the upscale Manhattan restaurant, silverware clinking softly against porcelain plates that looked more like art than food. Warm light poured over polished tables, reflecting in tall glasses and the quiet confidence of people who belonged there. Clara Evans did not. Her reflection in the glass door reminded her of that second-hand dress heels that pinched and a resume folder clutched too tightly in her hand. She inhaled, steadying herself. "You promised Clara. Just one more interview." Rain dotted her coat as she stepped inside. She scanned the tables for the applicant. She was supposed to meet a security guard candidate named John Taylor. Her eyes landed on a man sitting alone near the corner, shoulders hunched, jacket, worn thin hair, damp from the rain. He looked lost and cold. "That must be him," she whispered, and approached with a practiced smile. "Mr. Taylor, I am Clara Evans from HopeWorks Employment Center." The man looked up startled. His eyes were sharp yet tired, the kind that had seen too much. For a brief moment he seemed about to correct her, but then he nodded slowly, his voice low. "Yes, that is me." She sat down, pulling her notepad from her purse, trying to ignore the way his hands trembled slightly on the table. "I appreciate you coming despite the weather. It says here you used to work in maintenance." He paused, a faint smile crossing his face. "Something like that." Clara jotted notes, her tone professional, though she could not help but feel a flicker of sympathy. "The job is steady. It will not pay much at first, but it is honest work. You will have to deal with long hours and maybe some nights alone on site. Does that sound manageable?" He nodded again. "I am used to long nights." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. The lights flickered for a second, and the air between them shifted, a silent thread pulling something unspoken into the space. Clara offered him her coffee when she noticed he had not ordered anything. "Here, take it. You look frozen." He hesitated, then accepted it gently, both hands around the cup like it was a gift. "Thank you. It has been a while since someone offered me warmth without wanting something in return." Her brows furrowed at the strange tone, but before she could ask, her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "The real John Taylor is running late, stuck in traffic." Her stomach dropped. She looked up at the man across from her. The wrong man. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You are not." He met her gaze, calm, unreadable. "No, I am not." Clara flushed crimson, pushing back her chair. "I am so sorry, I thought." "It is all right," he said softly, his smile faint but genuine. It was nice being mistaken for someone worth meeting. She blinked, speechless. For a heartbeat, she saw something familiar in him, the quiet composure of someone who once belonged to a different world. But before she could ask anything more, he rose, adjusted his old jacket, and left. Clara stood frozen as the door swung shut behind him. The warmth of the room suddenly felt too bright, too loud. She pressed her lips together, whispering to herself, "Great. First I lose a sponsor, now I cannot even recognize my own interview." Outside, rain blurred the city lights into gold and gray. Across the street, under an awning, the man she had mistaken for a job applicant paused, watching her silhouette through the window. His name was Adrian Cole, and years ago he was the man whose decisions had destroyed her father's company. And his own. He pulled the worn silver watch from his pocket, the one engraved with R.E. The hands had stopped years ago, but tonight, as thunder cracked above it, ticked once. Maybe, he murmured, "It is time to make things right." He turned away into the storm. If you believe that sometimes mistakes are not coincidences, but second chances in disguise, stay with this story. Because what happens next will challenge every idea of revenge, redemption, and love you have ever known. Now, let us go back to our main character. The rain did not stop that night. It beat against the tall glass windows of Clara's office as she sat behind her desk, staring at the city lights blurred by water. The building was quiet. Most of her staff had gone home hours ago, but she stayed again. The financial reports on her desk were a storm of their own red lines overdue, bills, and a single letter from the bank warning her of foreclosure if she did not secure a new investor soon. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion pressing heavy against her chest. Her father's portrait hung on the wall behind her. Robert Evans, the man everyone once called a visionary. She remembered the day everything collapsed, the scandal, the accusations of fraud, the media calling him reckless. He died a month later, a broken man. Since then, she had spent every waking hour trying to rebuild what was left of his dream. A knock broke her thoughts. "Come in," she said quietly. Her assistant Lillian peeked inside holding a stack of folders. "You should go home, Clara. It is almost midnight." "I will. Just leave them on the desk." Lillian hesitated. "The press is talking again, about a possible takeover by Cole Industries." Clara froze. That name Cole sent a chill through her spine. Cole Industries is gone. The board dissolved after Adrian Cole vanished. That is what they thought, but rumors say he is back. Anonymous investors are buying small shares through shell companies. Clara's jaw tightened. If that man thinks he can touch what is left of Evans' group again. She stopped herself. It had been 5 years, but the bitterness still tasted fresh. When Lillian left, Clara sat back, the echo of the earlier encounter, replaying in her mind the man with tired eyes, the one she had mistaken for a job applicant. There had been something about him, a stillness that felt almost familiar. She shook the thought away. He was probably just another stranger passing through. The next morning, sunlight poured through the gray clouds as she arrived at HopeWorks, her community project. The center was a converted warehouse downtown where she trained people who had lost jobs or homes, people like the man from last night. Inside, a group of volunteers worked tirelessly painting walls, fixing computers, and serving hot coffee. It was the only place that made her feel grounded, useful, alive. But her heart stopped when she saw him again. Adrian stood near the back door, sleeves rolled up, helping an older man carry boxes of supplies. He looked different in daylight, taller, steadier, a quiet strength in the way he moved. Their eyes met across the room. "Mr. Taylor," she said sharply, crossing her arms. "You again?" He gave a calm nod. "I came to help. Your assistant said you needed volunteers. I did not realize job applicants were this persistent. I am not here for the job," he said, voice low. "Just thought this place could use another pair of hands." Clara hesitated. Her instinct told her to send him away, but the truth was she needed all the help she could get. "Fine," she said finally, "but this is not charity. You will work like everyone else. That is all I want." Hours passed, and he did work quietly, efficiently. He repaired broken wiring, fixed a jammed door, and even taught one of the trainees how to read a maintenance blueprint. Every time she looked at him, she caught herself wondering who he had been before life dragged him down. When the last volunteer left, Clara found him outside, sitting on the steps with a mug of coffee, watching the sunset stain the sky gold. She sat beside him before realizing what she was doing. "Where did you learn all that?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Used to build things, until I learned how easy it is to destroy them." The honesty in his tone startled her. For a long moment neither spoke. The city hummed around them, soft and distant. Then he looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are Robert Evans' daughter, aren't you?" Her breath caught. "How do you know my father?" He stared ahead, expression unreadable. "Everyone in this city knew your father. Some of us owed him more than we ever admitted." Before she could ask more, he stood. "Thank you for letting me help today." And with that, he walked away, leaving her with 1,000 unspoken questions. That night, she could not sleep. Her mind kept replaying his words, the look in his eyes when he said he owed her father. She pulled out the old silver watch she had found among her father's belongings, the one engraved with R.E., and turned it over in her palm. Somewhere across the city, Adrian Cole sat in a dim apartment with a matching watch ticking in his hand. The same engraving, the same initials. For the first time in years, he whispered her name, Clara Evans. The second chance he never thought he would have had just walked back into his life. The following week came with gray skies and deadlines that refused to move. Clara barely had time to think between meetings and board calls. The company was sinking faster than she could patch its leaks, and the investors were circling like vultures. Every night she stayed late, the same phrase echoing in her mind. Coal Industries is back. One evening, while reviewing documents at Hopeworks, she heard the familiar sound of a hammer hitting wood. She turned to see Adrian in the back corner, repairing a broken shelf. He wore the same worn jacket sleeves rolled, a small bruise visible on his wrist from lifting heavy boxes. "You should not be here this late," she said, setting down her folder. He looked up, calm as ever. "Neither should you." There was no argument in his tone, only quiet understanding. She walked closer, watching the way he measured each nail before striking. "You work like someone who used to run a construction crew," she said. He smiled slightly. "Not quite, but I did manage a few projects in my time." Clara crossed her arms. "Projects or empires?" For the first time, his expression shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes, regret or maybe recognition. He set down the hammer and faced her. "Empires fall faster than people think." His voice carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. She wanted to ask who he really was, but something in his face told her not to. Instead, she pointed to the small office nearby. "Come on. I owe you coffee for all the work you have done." Inside, the flickering light of an old lamp filled the room with a soft amber glow. The air smelled faintly of paint and cold rain drifting through the open window. She poured 2 cups and handed him one. "You said you knew my father," she began. "What did you mean by that?" Adrian hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "He believed in people no one else would. He hired me once, a long time ago, when I had nothing but ideas and a bad reputation. He said, 'Build something that lasts longer than guilt.' I never forgot that." Clara blinked, surprised. "You worked for him." "Briefly," Adrian said quietly. "He deserved better than the ending he got." The room went still. Outside, thunder rolled soft but heavy. She swallowed hard. "You sound like you knew him well." He nodded once, but his gaze fell to the silver watch on her wrist. "That watch. Where did you get it?" "It was my father's," she said slowly. Why, Adrian's breath caught, but he hid it behind a faint smile. "Nothing. Just, it is rare to see something that carries time and memory together." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed sharply. It was Lillian again. "Clara, you need to come to the office right now. A representative from Coal Industries just arrived unannounced." Clara's eyes widened. She turned to Adrian. "Coal Industries." His face remained unreadable. "You should go. I will lock up here." She grabbed her bag and hurried out, her heart pounding. By the time she reached the corporate headquarters, the elevator doors opened to a crowd of executives whispering nervously. At the end of the corridor stood a tall man in a tailored black suit, his back to her, signing documents with deliberate precision. When he turned, her breath stopped. It was him. The same eyes, the same steady voice, but gone were the worn clothes and the quiet humility. The man before her was Adrian Cole, the missing billionaire everyone believed had vanished. "Good evening, Miss Evans," he said, calm and composed. "We need to discuss the future of your company." She stared at him, disbelief crashing into anger. "You lied to me. You pretended to be someone else, some drifter who needed a job." Adrian nodded slowly, accepting her fury. "I needed to see the truth for myself. Your company, your foundation, they are all at risk because of a man named Lucas Gray. He was my former associate. He used both our families to cover his fraud." Clara shook her head, voice trembling. "Do not you dare say his name. My father lost everything because of your company." "Yes," Adrian said softly. "And I lost mine because I trusted the wrong man." The silence between them was unbearable. Finally, he placed a sealed envelope on the desk between them. "Inside this file are records proof that your father was framed. If you read them, you will understand why I came back." He started to leave, but paused at the door. "And Clara, I never meant to deceive you. I only wanted to see if redemption was still possible." When the door closed behind him, Clara stood motionless, the weight of his words pressing on her chest. She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were copies of bank transfers, forged contracts, and a handwritten letter signed by her father addressed to Adrian Cole. It read, "If they ever blame, you know that I believed in you until the end." Clara's knees weakened. For the first time in years, the story she had built her hatred on began to crack. Outside, lightning flashed over the city, illuminating the silver watch on her wrist. Its reflection shimmered like a heartbeat brought back to life, and somewhere in the building across the street, Adrian watched the light from her window and whispered, "Forgive me, Robert, and maybe someday she will too." Clara did not sleep that night. The letter from her father lay open on the desk, the edges trembling under the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Every word carved a new truth into her chest. Her father had not been betrayed by Adrian Cole. He had trusted him, maybe even tried to protect him. All those years of anger, all those nights she cursed the Cole name were suddenly hollow. But the anger had not disappeared, it had simply changed shape. By sunrise it burned into determination. If Lucas Gray had framed both her father and Adrian, she would find him, and she would make him pay. She arrived at the Evans Group headquarters, early, the corridors echoing with her heels. Adrian was already there, waiting outside the boardroom. This time there was no disguise, no pretense. The billionaire had returned dressed in gray, the sharpness of power restored, yet when their eyes met, something softened. "You read the letter," he said quietly. "I did, and now you hate me less." She shook her head. "No, but I hate the wrong person a lot more." A faint smile crossed his face. "Then we are finally on the same side." Inside the boardroom, tension filled the air. Lucas Gray stood at the head of the table surrounded by his lawyers and board members. He greeted Clara with a practiced smile, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Clara, my dear, I heard you met Mr. Cole. Surprising is it not that ghosts still walk among us?" She ignored the jab. "We need to talk about the funding agreement." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Ah, yes, the deal that keeps your company afloat, or rather my investment that keeps you employed." Before Clara could respond, Adrian stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "You mean the investment built on stolen capital and forged documents?" Lucas's smirk froze. "Careful, Adrian. You disappeared for a reason." "I disappeared to gather proof," Adrian said evenly. "And now I have it." He opened the folder. Copies of transactions, offshore accounts, and correspondence linked directly to Lucas's name spilled across the table. The room went silent except for the steady hum of the air conditioning. Clara watched Lucas's expression shift from arrogance to panic. "You cannot prove any of this," Lucas snapped. "Those are copies." Adrian leaned closer. "The originals are with the Financial Crimes Division. As of this morning, you are under investigation." The color drained from Lucas's face. He stood abruptly, knocking over a glass of water. "You are finished, both of you. You think anyone will trust a fallen billionaire and a woman running her father's ruins?" Clara stepped forward, voice calm but cold. "No. They will trust the truth, and they will see that the Evans name still stands for integrity." Security entered the room moments later. Lucas tried to speak, but Adrian turned away, his eyes on Clara. The years of guilt etched into his face began to fade, replaced by something almost human: relief. When the officers led Lucas out, silence returned. Clara exhaled shakily, leaning on the edge of the table. "You planned this all along, did you not?" "I planned to make things right," Adrian said softly, "but I did not expect to find you." Her chest tightened. "You mean the woman whose life you accidentally ruined?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "The woman who made me believe I could start over." The words hung between them, fragile and real. Days later, the news broke. Evans Group restored partnership with Cole Industries announced. The scandal was over. Lucas Gray's empire had collapsed overnight, and Clara's company had not only survived, it had transformed. That evening, she returned to HopeWorks, the place where it all began. The center buzzed with laughter and new volunteers. A new plaque gleamed near the entrance. The Evans Cole Foundation Building, Futures with Integrity. Adrian was there, standing by the window, watching the sunset reflect against the glass. "You named it after both of us," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "It seemed fair. You lost everything because of my father's mistakes. I lost everything because of yours. Maybe this is how we both rebuild." He nodded slowly, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You still wear the watch. I thought about throwing it away," she admitted. "But then I realized it was not broken. It had just stopped waiting." Adrian took a deep breath and reached into his pocket. He pulled out his own watch, the twin to hers. "Then maybe it is time to set them right." He adjusted the dial on both, the ticking synchronizing in the quiet. The sound filled the room like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. Clara looked up, meeting his gaze. "What happens now?" Adrian's voice softened. "Now we stop surviving. We start living." For a moment neither spoke. The city lights flickered on one by one and rain began to fall again, gentle this time, almost forgiving. Clara stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "You said once that empires fall faster than people think." He smiled. "But maybe love builds slower and lasts longer." She laughed quietly, the sound warm and real. "Then let us build it carefully." As the rain whispered against the windows, the two stood together beneath the soft glow of the foundation sign. Two people once broken by ambition, now bound by redemption. The clocks on their wrists ticked in perfect sync, and for the first time in years, time was on their side. Weeks passed and the city seemed to breathe differently. For the first time in years, Clara Evans did not wake up to chaos. The headlines were no longer about scandal or loss. They were about restoration, partnership, and hope. The Evans Cole Foundation had become a symbol of second chances. Yet for Clara, peace did not come easily. She still found herself pausing in doorways, wondering if she could truly trust the man who had once carried her family's ruin in his name. Every time Adrian walked into a room, the air shifted. He was no longer the mysterious stranger at the restaurant or the ghost of a fallen empire. He was here, present, rebuilding beside her. But there were walls between them still. One night, after a long meeting with the city council, Clara stayed behind in the office. Rain tapped gently against the windows, the same rhythm that seemed to follow every turning point in her life. Adrian appeared in the doorway, jacket draped over his arm. "You are still working." She glanced up, tired but smiling. "Old habits die hard." He stepped closer. "Or maybe you just do not know how to stop saving the world." The warmth in his voice startled her. She looked down at the papers scattered across the desk. "I am not saving the world, Adrian. I am just trying to fix what was broken." He moved beside her, his tone quieter now. "Maybe it is time to fix yourself too." She met his gaze, searching for the man behind the legend. "You make that sound easy." "It is not," he admitted. "But I think it starts with forgiveness." "Forgiving you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Forgiving yourself." The words hit deeper than she expected. She looked away, blinking fast. "You do not know what it feels like to carry someone else's failure." Adrian gave a small, almost sad smile. "Actually, I do. I carried your father's name on my conscience for 5 years." The room fell silent. For a long moment, only the sound of rain filled the space between them. Then Clara reached into her drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside lay the silver watch her father had left behind. She held it out to him. "This belongs to you." It was never just his. Adrian looked at it, his expression unreadable. "You kept it." "I could not throw it away," she said softly. "It was a reminder of everything I lost. But maybe now it can remind me of everything I found again." He took the watch carefully, his fingers brushing hers. "You have no idea what this means." Clara smiled faintly. "Maybe I do." They stood like that for a moment, two people bound by time, pain, and something neither dared to name. Then Adrian cleared his throat and reached into his pocket. "There is something else I wanted to give you." He placed a single envelope on the table. Inside was a document, a proposal for permanent partnership between their foundations, equal ownership, and a handwritten clause at the bottom. It read, "All decisions must be made together." Clara looked up, eyes glistening. "You could have signed this yourself." "I could," he said, "but then it would just be another business deal. I wanted it to mean something real." Her heart softened. "And what if I say yes?" "Then this is not a contract," he said quietly. "It is a promise." The lights flickered as thunder rolled in the distance, and for a second it felt like the world had paused to listen. She reached for a pen, her hand trembling slightly, and signed beside his name. When she looked up, he was watching her not with the distance of a businessman, but with the quiet certainty of a man who had finally found home. "Does this make us official partners now?" she asked. He smiled. "In every sense that matters." A laugh escaped her, small but genuine. "You always know the right thing to say." "Only because I already said all the wrong ones," he replied. Outside, the rain softened into mist. Adrian walked to the window and opened it slightly, letting in the cool night air. "Listen," he said. "You can hear the city again." Clara joined him, leaning against the frame. The skyline shimmered in the distance, bright, alive, endless. She felt something inside her finally unclench. "I think my father would have liked you," she whispered. Adrian's voice was low, steady. "He already did." She turned toward him, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You told me he believed in you, but I never asked why." "Because he saw something I could not see in myself," Adrian said. "And now, so do you." Their hands brushed, neither pulled away. For a moment there was no past, no guilt, no difference between loss and love. Just two people who had walked through fire and found light on the other side. When Clara finally spoke, her voice trembled. "What happens now?" Adrian smiled, the faintest trace of hope in his eyes. "Now we keep our promise." As the clock on the wall ticked softly behind them, Clara slipped her hand into his. Time, once broken, began to move again. The morning after the signing, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. It streamed through the tall glass windows of the Evans Cole Foundation, scattering gold across the marble floor. Clara stood near the window, coffee in hand, watching volunteers arrive below. For the first time in years, she felt calm. No chaos, no headlines, just the quiet hum of a life finally beginning to make sense. Adrian entered the room quietly. His sleeves were rolled tie, loosened a rare softness, replacing the sharp corporate armor he used to wear. "You are here early," he said. "So, are you?" Clara replied, with a small smile. "I thought billionaires preferred to appear fashionably late." He chuckled. "I used to, but lately I find mornings easier when I know what I am waking up for." She turned toward him, curiosity soft in her voice. "And what is that exactly, you?" he said simply. Then he hesitated, as if realizing the weight of the truth he had just spoken. "You and this, the foundation, the work, all of it." Her heart caught for a second. It had been a long time since anyone had said something to her without calculation. Before she could respond, Lillian entered with a folder. "Clara, the press conference is set for noon. They want both of you to speak." Clara nodded. "Thank you, Lillian." As soon as they were alone again, Adrian leaned against the desk. "Do you ever miss it? The boardrooms, the chaos, the power." She thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but I do not miss who I had to become that to survive it." Adrian looked at her quietly. "Then maybe this is our second life, one where we do not have to prove anything to anyone." The rest of the morning moved quickly. Reporters filled the courtyard and cameras flashing, microphones raised. Clara stood beside Adrian as they unveiled the foundation's new initiative, a scholarship program for workers who had lost everything in corporate layoffs. The irony was not lost on either of them. As the press conference ended, a reporter shouted, "Miss Evans, are you and Mr. Cole partners only in business?" Clara froze for a heartbeat. The world seemed to pause with her. Adrian's expression remained calm, but his eyes sought hers, waiting. Then she smiled, professional but warm. "Partnership is about trust," she said, "and we have learned that the hard way." The crowd laughed, cameras flashed, and for a moment everything felt perfectly in balance. That night, after the crowd dispersed, the building emptied, leaving only soft echoes of the day's success. Clara stood alone in the conference hall, her heels clicking against the floor. She looked up at the giant mural newly installed above the stage, a painting of two interlocked gears surrounded by light. Underneath, a quote from her father read, "Build something that lasts longer than guilt." She felt tears sting her eyes. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. A familiar voice answered behind her. "He would be proud of you." Adrian approached, hands in his pockets, gaze on the mural. "He said that to me once, you know. The same line. I never thought I would understand it until now." Clara turned to him. "You do now." He nodded slowly. "Because of you." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the rain start again outside. Finally, Clara spoke, her tone soft but steady. "When this all started, I hated you. I blamed you for everything. But now, I do not even know where that version of me went. She grew into someone your father would have recognized," Adrian said. "Strong, fearless, human." Her laugh was quiet, almost shy. "You always know how to say the right thing." He smiled. "Not always, but I mean this one." Clara stepped closer, the distance between them closing until she could feel his breath. "Then say it," she whispered. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Clara, when I lost my company, I thought I had nothing left to live for. But meeting you mistakenly awkwardly in that restaurant was the first time in years I felt seen. You made me believe redemption was not a fantasy. Her eyes softened. And you made me believe forgiveness was not weakness. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, an old picture of her father and him, shaking hands dated 10 years ago. On the back, written in her father's handwriting, were the words, "For Clara, when she is ready to lead." She touched the photo with trembling fingers. He kept this, Adrian nodded. He believed in both of us long before we believed in ourselves. Clara's throat tightened. She met his eyes and whispered, "I am ready now." Adrian took her hand slowly, the air between them quiet and charged. "Then let us build something that lasts." She smiled through the tears. "We already have." Outside, the rain stopped, leaving the city wrapped in silver light. The mural behind them gleamed, the gears interlocked perfectly, two lives once broken now turning together in rhythm. As they stood there, hand in hand, the old clock above the doorway began to chime softly. For the first time, neither flinched at the sound. Time was no longer something they had to outrun. It was something they finally understood how to share. Autumn came quietly to the city, painting every street in shades of amber and gold. The Evans Cole Foundation had become a living symbol of second chances. Its programs reached across neighborhoods, giving jobs, training, and dignity to people who had long been forgotten. Every success story carried Clara's name, and behind the scenes, Adrian's guidance. To the world, they were partners. To each other, they had become something harder to define. Every morning, Adrian arrived early with black coffee for her. Every night, she lingered in the office just a little longer, waiting for his footsteps in the hall. Their words were often about work, but their silences spoke of something deeper, a bond built from loss, rebuilt through forgiveness. Still, both knew the past had one more shadow left to face. It came in the form of a letter. A legal notice arrived one morning, its seal from the estate of Robert Evans. Clara opened it with shaking hands. Inside was her father's final addendum to his will, a confidential clause revealing that a portion of Evans Group's remaining shares had been transferred years ago to Adrian Cole himself. She read the document twice, heart pounding. The date on it was months before the scandal, before her father's death. He had given Adrian silent ownership of the company long before everything fell apart. By the time Adrian entered her office, she was standing at the window, the papers trembling in her hands. "You knew," she said, quietly. He stopped in his tracks. "Clara, let me explain. You knew all along. My father made you a part owner, and you let me hate you for years." Adrian's expression softened, his voice calm but heavy. "He asked me to keep it hidden. He believed if the truth came out, the board would destroy both our families. He made me promise to protect you, even from myself." She turned sharply, eyes flashing. "You kept a secret that could have changed everything. You let me drown in guilt while you played savior." "It was not about saving you," Adrian said, stepping closer. "It was about honoring the man who believed in both of us. Robert gave me more than ownership. He gave me a chance to make things right after I ruined my own life." Her throat tightened. "So, all of this, the foundation, the partnership, was out of guilt, no?" he said firmly. "It started that way, but it stopped being guilt the moment I met you again." The words hung in the air, like a confession too honest to take back. For a moment, Clara could not speak. The storm outside gathered strength, thunder rumbling faintly in the distance. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I need time, Adrian, to understand what was real and what was not." He nodded, pain flickering across his face. "Take all the time you need. I will be here." Days passed with uneasy silence. Clara buried herself in work, but every meeting, every late night in the empty office felt hollow without his presence. The truth had shaken her, but beneath the anger there was something else. She realized she was not hurt because he had lied. She was hurt because he had mattered. One evening she found herself walking through the foundation's courtyard. The lights glowed soft and warm against the brick walls. Volunteers laughed inside, unaware of the storm inside her heart. On the far bench sat Adrian alone. Holding the silver watch that once belonged to her father, she approached quietly. "You always end up here," she said. He smiled faintly. It is the only place where the noise stops. She sat beside him, hands folded. I read the rest of the documents, my father's notes. He wrote that he trusted you more than himself. He said if I ever doubted you, I should look at how you chose to live after losing everything. Adrian looked at her carefully. And what did you see? I saw a man who rebuilt a world out of broken pieces, she whispered, and I realized I have been living afraid of the past instead of learning from it. He exhaled softly, the tension melting from his shoulders. Does that mean I'm forgiven? She smiled through the tears that blurred her vision. It means you never had to ask. They sat together in silence, watching the city lights shimmer through the drizzle. Clara leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, and for the first time there was no more pretending, no more masks. Adrian whispered, "Your father was right. Some things do last longer than guilt. And some people," she said quietly, "are worth the time it takes to forgive." The clock tower across the street chimed once, echoing through the night. He took her hand and she did not let go. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of something real, born not from revenge or redemption, but from the simple, fragile act of choosing each other again. Winter settled over Manhattan with the kind of quiet that made the city feel almost tender. Snow softened the noise, blurring the edges of glass and steel. Inside the Evans Cole Foundation, soft lights glowed against the windows while the laughter echoed faintly from a charity event downstairs. Clara stood on the balcony wrapped in a dark coat, watching flakes fall through the night. Behind her, footsteps approached. Adrian's voice carried the warmth that always found her no matter how cold the air. "You disappeared in the middle of your own gala." She smiled faintly without turning. "Sometimes I need a minute to remember what all of this used to mean. There was a time when I could not imagine rebuilding anything." Adrian moved beside her, his breath misting in the cold. "And now look at you. You turned a tragedy into hope for thousands of people." She looked at him, her eyes soft. Not alone. He met her gaze, and for a moment the rest of the city faded. Everything they had endured, the deception, the anger, the long road to forgiveness, felt distant now. All that remained was the quiet understanding between two people who had survived each other and still stayed. Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted to give you something before the year ends." He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a blueprint for a new building labeled the Robert Evans Learning Center. His brow furrowed. "You are naming it after your father?" She shook her head. "We are naming it after both of you. The man who believed in second chances and the man who proved they were real." Adrian's throat tightened. "Clara, this is—" He trailed off, emotion catching the words. "You did not have to. I wanted to," she said gently, "because every time I look at what we built, I see him and I see you." Maybe that is how legacy really works. It is not about what we leave behind. It is about who we choose to forgive. For a long moment they stood in silence, the snow falling thicker now. Then Adrian reached into his coat and revealed something small, a ring box. Her breath caught. "Adrian." He opened it, revealing a simple gold band. No diamonds, no grand gesture, just sincerity. "This is not about contracts or redemption anymore," he said softly. "It is about the future, about wanting to walk beside you when the noise fades and the cameras turn away." Clara's eyes filled with tears that glimmered in the soft light. "You do realize you are terrible at timing, right?" He smiled. "Maybe, but I finally stopped running out of time." She laughed through the tears and nodded. "Then, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring under her finger, his hands trembling slightly from the cold and from everything that moment carried. The snow kept falling, covering the balcony in silver light. Clara leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You once said empires fall faster than people think," she whispered. "But maybe love, real love, lasts longer than either of us ever planned." Adrian looked out over the city, the foundation's lights glowing far below. "Then let us make sure it does," he said quietly. As the night deepened, the sound of music rose from the hall below, soft and full of life. Inside, people celebrated the future of a company reborn. But on the balcony, two people stood still, wrapped in the quiet truth they had fought so hard to earn. The storm had passed, the clocks had caught up, and at last time belonged to them. Spring arrived like a quiet promise. The snow melted from the city streets and the Evans Coal Foundation buzzed with new life. The construction of the Robert Evans Learning Center had begun, and every morning Clara and Adrian visited the site together. It stood on the same block where her father's company had once fallen, a symbol that even ruins could bloom again. Clara walked across the scaffolding, her hair pulled back against the wind, a clipboard in hand. She stopped beside Adrian, who was overseeing a group of workers. His sleeves were rolled, a streak of dust across his shirt. "You look nothing like the billionaire everyone used to fear," she teased. He smiled, glancing at her. "And you look nothing like the woman who once mistook me for a job applicant." She laughed softly. "Maybe that was not a mistake after all. Maybe it was fate," he replied, his tone gentle but sure. When the day ended, they stood side by side, watching the sunset spill gold over the unfinished building. The wind carried the sound of hammers and laughter, a melody of rebuilding. Clara slipped her hand into Adrian's, their fingers fitting easily now, like they had always been meant to. "I used to think my father's story ended in failure," she said quietly. "But standing here, I realize it just took a little longer to find the right ending." Adrian nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "He built something that lasted longer than guilt. So did you." The official opening came 3 months later. The courtyard overflowed with people, students, families, volunteers, all gathered beneath a banner that read, "The Robert Evans Learning Center, where hope begins again." Cameras flashed, music played, and Clara took the stage. Her voice carried steady over the crowd. "5 years ago, this place was only an idea. My father believed that real wealth is not what you keep, but what you share. Today, we honor that belief by giving others the chance to rebuild, just as we did." She paused, her gaze, finding Adrian in the front row. "This foundation was born from loss, but it grew through forgiveness. It reminds me that even the worst mistake can lead to something worth living for." Applause filled the air as Adrian joined her on stage. Instead of a grand speech, he simply reached for her hand. "Your father told me once that kindness was a kind of inheritance," he said softly. "He was right, because you have given it back to the world 100 times over." The crowd quieted as Clara turned to him, eyes shining. "Then let us keep giving," she whispered. He smiled, slipping his arm around her as the ribbon was cut. Balloons rose into the spring sky, and laughter rippled through the courtyard. Somewhere above the noise, the old clock tower across the street chimed noon, a steady reminder that time once broken had found its rhythm again. When the ceremony ended, Clara and Adrian lingered behind. The crowd dispersed and the courtyard fell silent except for the rustle of new leaves. She looked up at the building's glass facade reflecting the sky. "It feels like he is here," she said. Adrian nodded. "He is. In every life we help, in every story we rebuild." Clara leaned against him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think this is what forgiveness looks like?" He smiled, his eyes soft. "No, Clara. This is what love looks like." The last of the sunlight brushed across their faces as they stood together, surrounded by everything they had fought for. The city around them pulsed with life again, not louder but kinder. And in that quiet, the words her father once wrote returned to her mind like a prayer. "Build something that lasts longer than guilt." This time she finally understood. She had built love, she had built home, and it would last.